Oops. Good evening, everyone. My name is Wyatt Wegerson. I'm one of the owners here at Bookworks in Albuquerque. We have a very special guest tonight. We have Margaret Randall. She is a feminist poet, writer, translator, photographer, social activist. She's the author of over 150 books. She's received the 2019 Heidi Santa Maria Medal from Casa de las Americas in Havana, and the prestigious 2019 Poet of Two Hemispheres Prize, presented by Ecuador's Poesía en Paralelo Cero. In 2017, she was awarded the Medal of Literary Merit by Literatura en el Bravo, Chihuahua, Mexico. The University of New Mexico granted an honorary doctorate in letters in 2019. She received the 2020 George Garrett Award in AWP, the Paulo Fierro Prize by Chapman University. If you have any questions or reactions, I recommend using the chat function. I will try and keep an eye on it to ask questions during the Q&A. I just want to let everybody know about supply chain issues in the world that are going on right now, and that if there are books that you'd like to gift people during the third and fourth quarter, to try and get a jump on it early. We appreciate all your support here in Albuquerque from ordering. If you'd like a signed copy, Margaret will come down to the shop next week. And if you do order through our website, which I will put in the chat, if you could just make a comment that you'd like a signed copy or a personalization of how you'd like it personalized, and if you could include that in the comment field on your online order. I appreciate you all for coming, and without that, if you welcome Margaret, and I will pass it over to you. Oh, Margaret, you're muted.
See, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Wyatt, very much. Thanks everyone for coming. It's great as always to be at Bookworks. Really, our wonderful independent bookstore here in Albuquerque. It's served our community for so long. And as you all know, we have to support our independent bookstores, because if we don't, we're going to be reading what corporate America wants us to read. So that's really important. I'm going to be presenting two new books tonight. This one first, which is Thinking About Thinking. It's a collection of short essays published by Casa Urraca Press in northern New Mexico. Zach Hively is here with us tonight from the press. It's really a great press with great titles, and as you can imagine, we also have to support independent publishing. So I'm going to read a couple of short essays from that book, and then I'll read from my new book of poems. This first essay is called Never Quite. I'm reaching back through time and space, my outstretched arms flailing through a murky sea, heaving and tossing. Objects, broken or whole, collide with me, although there is no danger of damage inflicted. This isn't a physical exercise, but one of the senses, the mind. Time seems to expand and contract, but no discrete event comes into focus. I'm searching for something elusive, whether I give it my utmost concentration or the freedom of total relaxation. Some would surely search for their birth, that volatile frontier between amniotic waters and first gulp of air, or perhaps a preview of their death. These are the frontiers humans have wondered about since the beginning of time. There are plenty of tales, none of which have seemed reliable to me, too unimaginative, too cliched, too much in the mold of religious dogma. Besides, I'm sure memory itself works differently on either side of those impenetrable lines, its function and exercise operating by rules we cannot know. Too much to expect our memories to bridge such disparate territories. I'm also less ambitious, seeking out less dramatic, more conscious change. For example, it would be a welcome accomplishment were I simply to be able to distinguish those words that first gave name to colors and how I responded to them. Mother would have pointed to ordinary objects, encouraging me with a question such as, "What color is this?" And after much trial and error, I might respond in a way that fit the question, causing her a smile of pride and satisfaction as my infant voice announced blue or red. First color, first number, first ability to link 2 or 3 words in something that could be called a sentence. First identification of words on a page. First successful effort to produce those words myself. First utterance completely of my own creation. First narrative. First successful lie. Such moments as these are the ones I would retrieve now through the long fog of 85 years of mindless accumulation. The muddled moment before and the illuminated one after learning to read. The before and after that outlined in brilliant light an understanding of how I might add a dart of my own discovery to someone else's equation. Learning to sit up or crawl or walk, such physical advances seem mechanical by comparison. It's the imaginative moment of consciousness I hope to lay bare, to repossess. The impossible journey began this morning as I lay on the couch, eyes half closed, trying to heal from a flu that beat me to submission more than a week ago. Fever can level the playing field, remove obstacles standing in the way. My mind traveled to the unknown and unrecorded instant when for the first time I didn't simply understand that one train of thought or another was logical, believable, important, but injected something of my own into the exploration, thus expanding or changing the direction of its meaning. A creation of my own, building upon knowledge itself, that ragged tangle, millennia of linked ideas, a patchwork beginning long before written history and continuing seamlessly into a future that may or may not come to be. That moment in which I may claim my place in the storyline, impossibly elusive and at once deeply precious. The nature of human aging seems to erase early memories, even as it acquires new ones. We lose those made early on as we replace them with those of more recent vintage. A reversal of sorts occurs in people diagnosed with dementia. They may lose more recent memories while retaining or revisiting those made long ago, often surprising loved ones resigned only to loss. So little is known about such painful memory change, and it is so often misinterpreted that generalizing about the phenomenon leads us into dead-end conjecture at best. As I ponder this, I realize that what most interests me are not really those breakout moments in which I was first able to identify a color or decipher a word on the page. For years, throughout early and middling adulthood, I walked an increasingly complex map on which I waded through choices. Does this or that explanation for the mystery of life seem more reasonable? Who among the thinkers who have gone before inspires the most confidence? Who can I follow? Whose thinking must I reject? At some point, following was not enough. I needed to lead, or at least to be part of the leading contingent. And I found myself adding a question here, an idea there. I recognized my own ability to help shape the conversation. A lot of it is about passion and questions, our reluctance or readiness to ask them. We are conditioned to believe our world is peopled by experts who have all the answers, and the rest of us who are destined to follow their advice. And so we have situations such as that with the famous British anthropologist Eric Thompson, who in the 19th century set the work on Maya glyphs back at least 100 years because no one dared challenge the direction of his research, which turned out to be wrong. Or the respected linguist Noam Chomsky a century later, who posited that language acquisition was in our DNA. That too turned out to be an erroneous assumption, delaying research in the field by decades. Our great thinkers deserve our admiration, but anyone can be fallible, make mistakes. Questioning is a vital part of learning. In an educational system designed to produce mimics rather than original thinkers, it's rarely encouraged. I have come to understand that today's extreme specialization fragments the connective tissue that renders the map readable. Contrary to common assumption, the more we know about each piece of the whole, the less we may understand. The more holistic our approach, the easier it is to enter underpasses, detours, and byways, bridges and footpaths. A sure-footed mountain goat may lead us along the faintest of trails. A mole may take us beneath the earth's, a mole may take us beneath the earth's surface into its hidden abode where there is no light, only sensation. If we could bring ourselves to be humbler, if we respected and were willing to move as easily into the smallest ideas as into the largest, we might be surprised at what we find. And so I search, allowing my mind to wander through my years, ignoring limitations born of class, culture, race, gender, and habit. No direction left unimagined, no pathway too insignificant. I may yet find a sliver of what I seek. If I do, I hope I don't let it slip through my fingers out of ignorance, intimidation, a failure of the imagination, lack of confidence, or fear. Sometimes we can really only see with our eyes closed. So that's one of the essays. And I'm going to read one more. This one is shorter. It's called Becoming Elizabeth Taylor. And it's probably going to be familiar to those who live here in Albuquerque. At least the setting will be familiar. But I think there are places like this in every city and in every childhood. So Becoming Elizabeth Taylor. As a young teen in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I went on Saturdays and Sundays to the Lobo Theater near my home, a small, unpretentious movie house my parents allowed me to walk to by myself. I pretended I was under 12 so I could get in for 10 cents. But to myself, I pretended I was older. I wanted to be a grown and glamorous woman. I wanted to be Elizabeth Taylor. That little neighborhood theater no longer shows films, instead holding Sunday services for a religious sect that calls itself City on the Hill. 70 years ago, it was a weekend magnet for me and my friends. After seeing National Velvet, 1944, or Little Women, 1949, I was Elizabeth Taylor. I walked like her, spoke like her, and held my head just as she did. When others failed to acknowledge my transformation, I waited expectantly, giving them time for recognition. I gazed into the eyes of anyone I met from beneath the long lashes and liquid depth of Elizabeth's violet eyes. Those violet eyes were the thing. Technicolor had enhanced motion pictures for only a few short years. The very first movie I'd seen was The Bells of St. Mary, 1945. Mother took me when I was 9 or 10. Ingrid Bergman commanded the screen with her classic beauty, but that picture was in black and white, and I wasn't seduced into becoming Ingrid. Never since that magical time have I so mindlessly embodied another woman. As I matured, I identified much more realistically and profoundly with women whose aspirations more closely resembled mine. Mentors, Elaine de Kooning, Laurette Séjourné, Nancy MacDonald. Heroines, Aide Santa Maria and Dora Maria Tejas. Prophetic poets whose voices still sound in my head, such as Adrienne Rich, Audre Lorde, and Anne Waldman. Rosalind Franklin, the woman who first saw DNA's double helix, although men took the credit and won the big prize, and she died at the age of 37 from the radiation in her laboratory. And so many ordinary women who have waged a constant struggle of resistance against patriarchy's obscene demands. But identifying with is not the same as becoming. The latter is something you can only do when you're an adolescent yearning to incarnate the unobtainable qualities of your dreams. When young desire holds you in its grip and you are powerless to escape its seduction. Little Women had captured my young imagination as a novel. By the time I saw the film, I had read the book several times over. I wanted to be Jo, the writer, or maybe older sister Meg. But when I saw the film, I became Amy, the artist who went to Europe to study and whose life was by far the most exciting. I became Amy because Elizabeth Taylor was Amy, and I had become Elizabeth Taylor. My young adulthood coincided with Hollywood's era of greatest glory. Judy Garland, Grace Kelly, Marilyn Monroe, and Audrey Hepburn were other magnetic movie icons with whom I grew up. I thrilled to Judy's voice, believed Grace's story of the commoner turned fairy tale princess, cried over Marilyn's tragic death, and longed for Audrey's graceful neck. Oh, how I lifted my chin and stretched my neck in an effort to look like Audrey. But none of those personas inhabited me as Elizabeth did. Elizabeth Taylor in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, 1958, or Cleopatra, 1963, was even more glamorous than she'd been in her earlier films when she and I were both younger. By then, though, I had stopped emerging from movie houses, embodying a star's identity. I was already beginning to embody my own. So, 'Cause those are two examples of the essays in Thinking About Thinking. I chose to read some that were, shorter than the others, but there are longer essays. There's one in particular called Was Shakespeare a Political Poet? There's an essay about Me Too. There's an essay about the racist statues that are coming down these days. So there are essays that deal with contemporary issues and essays that are a bit more personal. This book, Out of Violence into Poetry, which is my most recent collection of poems, was published by Wings Press in San Antonio, Texas. Bryce Milligan has been curating my poetry there since 2009, and I'm so grateful for his clear eye and beautiful design skills. So I'm going to end by reading a few poems from that book, and then I hope we can have a conversation. So the first poem is the title poem from the book, Out of Violence into Poetry. Water, real or illusory, shimmers along the desert horizon. Oasis, early 17th century word via late Latin from the Greek, perhaps of Egyptian origin. Egypt, a country of vast sand where wet and fertile exceptions nourish life. Also peaceful area or period in the midst of troubled times. Thus, place becomes time in the blink of geography's eye, double helix embracing itself as it rises in our throats, seesaw of intuition singing loud. Let me satiate your thirst, feed your hunger, satisfy mine, if only because we are conscious beings standing together in this dangerous century. We are reduced to small gestures, reflected in a gaze or touch of a hand, oases of light, where we may move out of violence into poetry. Some of the poems in this new book touch on the issue of aging, which at my age has become an issue. And some of you in the audience may also share that. Some of you may recognize the subject matter of the following poem. It's called Banana, Sunrise, Chair. I'll say 3 words, the nurse explains, and I want you to repeat them after me. Later, I'll ask you to tell me what they were. She says 3 words, and I repeat them, then wait complacently for the next problem. Banana, sunrise, chair. I try to remember those words as I drew a picture of a clock at 10 past 11, make a circle, then place a 12 at the top, 6 at the bottom, 3 and 9 where they go, before filling in the other numbers. I draw the small hand pointing at 11, the long aimed at 2. Excellent, the nurse smiles as she takes the paper from my hand, then waits a moment before asking me for the 3 words. I say banana and sunrise, think a moment before adding chair. I wonder why I hesitated before chair, what this test says about my memory today or tomorrow, and how important it is to be able to remember 3 words or draw a clock with its numbers in the right places, hands spelling 10 past 11. I don't need to be reminded of the touch of your hand against my cheek. the way your skin feels against mine, its temperature and breath. I hope I never forget these things no nurse asks. Banana and sunrise and share take up dubious residence in me. Imposters defeated before the game ends. This one is called Lifetime Warranty. Age wears on the body parts, and I imagine a shop where replacements are shelved by model and date, the experimental or mass-produced on special sales tables, daring us to try a plastic nose immune to sun damage, or super batteries for heart or liver, guaranteed to last forever. Generic models would attract the low-income shopper, luxury versions, the elite who have everything but a perfect working body. The dispensary itself might be an upscale boutique or big box store where everyone goes for bargains, though no remedies yet for serious cancers, dementia, or flesh-eating bacteria. Short-term solutions are advertised in glowing terms and offered on brightly decorated racks right beside the cashier. They just may get you on the way out, and there is no layaway. This month's special is portable oxygen and tropical flavors. No shortage of deception when hope wears thin. I imagine visiting such a futuristic shop, boutique, or bargain basement, and know it is a first world dream. Desperate people everywhere sell body parts, hair and kidneys, or use their organs to carry contraband. If lucky, they may get enough to eat for a few more months, a fleeting chance at another day. What would a lifetime warranty mean to a body wearing only hope? Will the consumer hold out for designer DNA or invest in replacement body parts? How can those who sell a piece of themselves be sure a sliver of spirit or strand of character isn't lost in that deal of last resort? Privilege stalks the rich, while the poor hope only for survival. This one is called The Whole October Leaves. I open my eyes and October is gone. She ducked out while I slept, taking a birthday and 20 boxes of Girl Scout cookies a preteen was selling door to door. The whole October's left has ragged edges, a coastline where the struggle for justice stands on shifting sands before it succumbs to fortune tellers lying through rotten teeth. There are rules, the big men say, and they must be followed. No room for an idea that sets its own place at table, does its own dishes, makes its own bed. To those who say, that's women's work, the joke's on you. Generations fold October's hologram in sweaty hands, hold within it the only answer tough enough to last. I close my eyes for a second that feels like centuries. The loneliness of a hospital ward where 40 women long to hold their newborns. Columbus stumbling upon an inhabited continent. John Brown's stand at Harper's Ferry, Trujillo painting the massacre red, Ho Chi Minh entering Hanoi, Che at the Euro Ravine, and I still trapped at Tlatelolco. October is gone. I look to all the horizons, thinking I catch sight of a moving shadow, but only the calendar's empty page stares back. This one is called Each Toy Argues Its Future. Training begins emphatic and early, with nurseries painted pink or blue. Each toy argues its future identity, fighter planes or dolls, so men will learn to attack and women to receive their blows. A proper education continues as children of all genders are taught to stay within the lines. Each number calls forth a color, each obedience a round of applause. And what is this about other genders? They assure us only two are sanctioned by God and flag. Patriots follow the piper's tune, gamble on short-term satisfaction. Meanwhile, those ready to leap off that safe and rigid map discover we are the toy makers. And I'll end with this poem, which is called We Won't Take Yes for an Answer. We tell them we won't take yes for an answer. We tell them no means no and ask what part of that word they don't understand. Every secret place on the far side of casual conversation disappears after the fire sale. I would tell you, read my lips, but fear being taken for president boasting mission accomplished. There is no mission here, just vulnerability donning its invisibility cloak of shame. We tell them no means no. They smile disarmingly. We won't take yes for an answer and turn them into pillars of salt. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And I would love to turn this into a conversation. So if people have questions, comments, stories, let's hear them.
You can do this by, if you want to unmute yourself, and then we can, or if you want to raise your hand, I can call on you. I'll try and keep scanning the pages, or we can use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. But if you have a comment or question, Margaret, thank you so much. That was amazing. And we're all grateful for your reading and your work.
You're welcome.
Maureen?
I just wanted to say, Margaret, I think those are your most fabulous works ever. You've just gone beyond yourself. Just so beautiful and so brave works.
Thank you. Well, that means a lot coming from you. Yeah, I mean, bravery is something that it's elusive sometimes, and yet I think that all of us have developed our own versions of bravery during these past couple of years, or before, but I think one of the things that's happened in these last years is that it's a lot of self-examination and a lot of realization that our creativity really is our resilience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think the last couple of years have given a lot of people time to introspect a little bit and just to really rethink things. And it's kind of character building in a lot of ways. It's been.
I see Lisa has a little yellow hand up.
Excuse me. I hope my question is understood, but I think it was in the October poem, you mentioned being stuck in a place and I didn't recognize the name.
Oh, Tlatelolco.
Yes.
Yeah, in the Mexican student movement in 1968, which I took part in, along with hundreds of thousands of other people, young people and people who weren't so young. As some of you will remember, 1968, Mexico City hosted the Summer Olympics that were due to open on the 12th of October. And the student movement was raging, and the government was really intent on putting the movement down, on ending it, because they feared hotel cancellations and all the money that they had invested in the Olympics. And so we staged a peaceful demonstration at a place called the Plaza of Three Cultures. It's also called Tlatelolco, and more than 1,000 people were murdered there that day. And so that's that reference.
Okay. Thank you very much. I love that background, and I feel similarly that these poems are just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I think Juliana, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I was wondering, Margaret, do you ever write in Spanish? Your poems in Spanish?
I've never been able to. And when I lived in Latin America, I really tried hard to write in Spanish. Many poets I know are able to write in both languages, especially if they've lived for long periods of time in Spanish-speaking countries. But I just was never able to do that. I have written books of essays and oral history in Spanish, and I translate from Spanish into English. I've done a lot of translation, but I've never been able to write poetry in anything but English. Although sometimes Spanish phrases and words creep into my poems.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Marilyn says, congratulations, Margaret. So wonderful to hear you reading from the 2 new books. I look forward to reading them. Thank you for adding your comment, Marilyn. We appreciate you being here. Would you like to add anything else?
I'll say something. Am I heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so moved by your poems on aging. I have a mother who just turned 90, and you just the depth of observance of the detail of aging. And I think I wrote in the comments, it really struck me, lifetime warranty. I might be paraphrasing a little bit, for a body holding hope. I just was so struck by that. And then also in your first essay, there was a list and about, I think, remembering and first lie. And I just thought that was so brilliant in that essay. And it has me thinking like crazy about what to say that aloud. And then the stimulation for me with that, the trying to remember, as I listened to the rest of the essay, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what was my first lie? But thank you, just a really stunning reading.
You're welcome. Well, I think that the line, I think if I remember correctly, the line is something like first successful lie. Because, I told a lot of lies that sort of didn't work before I really learned to tell them well. And then they were successful. But yeah, aging is a really interesting thing. For me, I'd be 85 in December. And I've been lucky because I'm in fairly good health. I can still exercise and so forth. I can't hike anymore, which is something I hated giving up. But aging inevitably has drawbacks, of course, physical drawbacks, especially, and sometimes memory loss and so forth. But for me, and for me, aging has had those things, has all of those things, but it's also had some really positive aspects, which I'm really grateful for. I really don't believe that I've ever been happier or felt more productive or more capable of doing what I want to do, writing what I want to write, making certain connections that eluded me for many years. It's not like I feel like I'm completely there, but I'm still traveling. I'm still on the journey, and that just feels so good. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
I have an observation, if I may.
Who is it?
Good morning. This is Amit Dahiya Badshah from New Delhi, India.
Oh, great.
Thank you for a beautifully cadenced and deep reading, Ms. Randall. I was thinking about your comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I was thinking about your comment that you are able to work in the Spanish language, but you can't write poetry in it. This is validation of something I've believed all my life. As a working poet, I've made my living from poetry for the last 25 years. And it is this, that the human entity is so sophisticated, so complex, that it's possible for us to have different languages for different functions. We can have a thinking language, and it needn't be the language in which we work, perform our professional work and duties. And we can have a feeling language in which we do not necessarily think or function at a manual level in our work every day. For instance, my language is Haryanvi. It's the language of Jats, people who are farmers and soldiers, and one poet in the English language. And my language doesn't have a script, but it is my feeling language. My thinking language is Hindustani, but the language in which I work is English. And it is possible for us to have this only because the human entity is so capable of evolution and is so complex and wonderful. So I just felt that your statement was validation of something I've felt, believed, and practiced for a long time.
Thank you for that, Amit. Are you tuning in from India?
Yes, I'm in New Delhi, India. I was
that's
trapped
wonderful.
here.
Well, welcome. That's great to think that we have someone from India here. I really, what you say resonates with me because, for example, I have 4 children with whom I communicate in Spanish. It's our natural language. One of them doesn't speak English. And then, I have sort of English is my literary language, but I very often feel in Spanish, even though I might not write in that language. So yeah, I think you're right that we do have different languages. And then we, as poets, we create our own languages. So that's a whole other level.
Very true, very true.
Margaret, I wanted to ask you just what's been the difference in the last bunch of poems I read were the ones you did about the pandemic. And I'm just wondering, that was so concentrated on a particular kind. I wonder what the difference is between the kind of writing you're doing now versus what you were doing, 2 years, 18 months ago.
Oh, Louise, I guess, I hate to say this because the pandemic has been so painful for so many
Yeah.
people, and it's produced so much loss and so much insecurity and fear, that it's hard for me to speak of as something that has been positive in some way for me. And of course, it hasn't been the pandemic itself that's been positive, but the relative isolation, the expectancy that one can stay home and work and do research and read and think, as opposed to always going out and traveling and being here and there. It has been really good for me in terms of, as I said before, making connections and thinking through things maybe on a deeper level than I had before. So I think that I hope anyway that shows in my recent work. I have a few other books that are coming out in the next few months, and one that's also going to be published by Casa Urraca Press, which is called Storm Clouds Like Broken Promises. It's a collaboration between Barbara and me, some of her black and white photographs and my poems. That's again a whole other sort of approach to poetry. I have a book coming out in the spring of short stories, which is really also something that's happened during the pandemic. I never wrote short stories. It was very difficult for me to write prose. I wrote prose in the sense of essays, but I had never really written short stories. And all of a sudden, in the middle of this pandemic, I found myself with 30 short stories. I just started writing them furiously, one after another. So that's coming in the spring, and a book called Artists in My Life, which because you gave me a beautiful blurb for it, which is a prose book about artists whose work, visual artists whose work has influenced mine, and so forth and so on. So it's been possible for me to embrace all of these projects, basically simultaneously, because I've been sort of forced to be in the house and be able to make that a priority. So it has been an interesting experience. And in that respect, at least, it's been positive for me. Of course, I share the fears and the anxiety that this pandemic has produced in the world. And I don't think that we're anywhere near being in the clear. So. No one else. I see so many friends. It's so good to see all of you, friends, old friends and new friends. Hi, Billy.
In fact, Margaret, this is Amit again from New Delhi, India. I heard of you from Billy Brown, and
Really?
I thought he was going overboard with his praise of you as a philosopher and poet, but I realized that that you're everything he said you are.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know, Billy Brown is one of our treasures here in Albuquerque. he's not only a poet and a tremendous promoter of poetry. He has a venue called Fixed and Free, which hosts poetry readings every month and so forth. But he also is an incredible baker, and he shows up at all kinds of Albuquerque events, at least when we had live ones, with his wonderful cookies. So as I say, Billy is a treasure here.
And I'm holding my latest edited poetry anthology, in which Margaret appears and also Amit.
Yep, it's a huge anthology and really very fine one.
Thank you.
A pleasure, Billy. One of the things I discovered recently, Margaret, you know, I went through two rounds of COVID. That's why I'm trapped in Delhi, because the nearest hospital is too far from my village where I live. And that in addition to the languages in which we think and feel and work, there is another language in which we discover our inner reserves of strength, you know. And this I stumbled onto it in my second round of COVID, when doctors thought that I wouldn't make it because it's the Delta version, which is, you know, on top of my first round of COVID, it was just too much for me. And they asked me if I could call some relatives, and I realized, oh, this is not going in a good way. And this language in which we survive and in which we find our inner core strength, there's a word in Sanskrit, it's called anhad. Anhad, you know, the sound that is unheard but deeply felt.
That's it. Yeah, that's interesting. I have an interesting experience with one of your languages in India, with Bengali. I don't know anything about it, but one of my books was translated a few years ago into Bengali. And the translator and I would write back and forth emails, and he would ask me questions about, the book is a book about Che Guevara. It's a feminist treatise or a feminist view of Che's life. And there's a sentence in the book that references his aunt. And I remember the translator asking me, now, is this his mother's sister or his father's sister? Because apparently in Bengali, there are different words for the mother's or father's sister or brother. So it's interesting to find out these things about different languages that have different requirements and different attributes that we just don't think of if our language, if the particular language that is our language doesn't have those attributes. And to try to imagine why that would be, you know, why would it be necessary for a paternal aunt or a maternal aunt to have a different word used to describe them?
Another very interesting thing about Indian languages, did you know that we have more than 1,800 or 900 languages, including dialects in India? The Indian Parliament itself works in more than 23 languages, which are working languages for the country. And for instance, everything has a gender. Like a chair is feminine, but a door is masculine.
That's true in Spanish as well, yes.
Yeah. So every object has a gender. And my experience with Bangla was, you know, I have a signature poem on YouTube called The Last Will of the Tiger. which helped raise $500,000 to save the tiger on television. And a gentleman asked to translate it for me, and into Bangla. And when he read it at the book fair in Kolkata, my version is 3 minutes and 51 seconds, and he read for 7.5 minutes. Luckily, someone recorded it. And when I had that recording translated into English, I realized that it's a language that that really embellishes, the word. It celebrates the word through embellishment, and it's a beautifully cadenced language, very musical in its cadence. But the embellishment took the poem to a completely different direction, where the embellishment was the poem, not the tiger. And I thought that was very, very amusing.
I remember years ago I think I was living in Nicaragua at the time. A short poem, I can't remember who it was written by, was translated into English, and then that English version was translated back into Spanish, and then that was translated back into English. And this happened about, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15 times. And a poster was made. It was just a 4-line or a 6-line poem. So a poster was made of all of those versions, and they were completely different poems. I mean, they hardly had bore any resemblance to another. So translation can be interesting as well. So anyone else?
I have another question. You stated in one of your poems, walking an increasingly complex map. And you have such a network of poets, I think, in your world, due to your translations and all the friends that you've met along the way, the fellow poets, the writers, the artists. How does collaboration play into your work?
Oh, I think it plays a great deal into my work. I feel so fortunate that in the years I've lived, and I guess also the places that I've lived, because this happens because of moving around and being in different cultures, different countries, different communities. I've come to know so many different poets and artists and creative people who don't necessarily demonstrate their creativity in the arts, but maybe in something else, maybe in gardening or nursing or mothering or whatever, so social activism. So that networking is extraordinary. I had an extraordinary experience last night, for example. I did a Zoom reading for Moonstone, which is a cultural center, an old cultural center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a wonderful place that's been going for, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 years. And it's run by a man named Larry Robin. He invited me to read, and he invited a young Indonesian poet named Cynthia Dewi Oka. I had never heard of Cynthia, and we read together. And she is an absolutely spectacular poet. And it was so serendipitous because a lot of her poems, a lot of the poems that she chose to read were about issues of migration and immigration, and serendipitously mine as well. I had chosen, without knowing that she was involved in those issues, I had chosen poems that were, many of which were on the same theme. So, but I was looking at these issues as a white woman who did go through an immigration trial years ago, but basically I'm here, I'm safe. She was looking at them as at this issue as a young woman whose family came from Indonesia when she was a child, and who works with communities of undocumented East Asian people. And so it was just wonderful because we complemented each other, And I felt like my whole network or circle of friends has just been opened up, with this reading last night. Much the same way as I feel Amit has done for all of us tonight by bringing the presence of India and its 1,800 languages and dialects into our consciousness. So, the world is huge, and some of us are lucky enough to have lived in several parts of it. But even if we're not, even if we are just at home in our single place, there are ways today of building those bridges. I mean, one of the things I think a lot of us have complained about, a lot of poets over the past 2 years, is that live events are still too risky, and we haven't been able to have them, so we have to have these Zoom events. But and it's true that you miss some of the things that a live event makes possible. But on the other hand, when would someone from New Delhi be able to come to a reading in Albuquerque if it wasn't on Zoom? So, it's a trade-off, and it's just great. I really appreciated it a lot.
Great,
I
thank
I
you.
have to thank Robbins bookstore. I was there in the early part of the millennium, and I read there about almost, I think, 40 or 50 times.
Anyone else, or are we winding down?
Margaret, there's some great comments. Some people had to leave, but they wanted to send their thanks. Linnea said, "It's been wonderful to be here. I've enjoyed these essays and poems. Congratulations, Margaret." Lenora Good writes, "Margaret, thank you so much. I've ordered both your books and look forward to reading them and getting to know you via your words. Need to go, but I've truly enjoyed this evening. Thank you." Barbara said, "So sorry I had to leave. What a wonderful event," and asked if it was taped. And yes, we'll be posting this on our YouTube page. It's our Bookworks YouTube page. You can just, in the search, find us that way.
And I see there's a greeting from Susan Sherman, Ginger Legato, Lorene Mills, Mary Gilliland. So many people have posted things in the chat. Thank you for that. Catherine Strisick, Kitty Jaspi, Maureen, Doug, Stephanie Wiener. It's been great to have you all and to see these comments and to get this feedback, because that's another thing that, Zoom makes fairly easy to have these conversations. Often in a live reading, you'll get just a few people who will raise their hands and talk, but people seem to be a bit shyer. So I appreciate that about this. Thank you again to Bookworks. Thank you, everyone.
If you'd like to unmute yourself and say hello and celebrate Margaret and her work. She's been doing this just forever. And this is just amazing. So thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. You can unmute yourself and just give Margaret a big cheer.
Yay, great reading.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you all.